A few years ago, my husband abandoned me and our 2 children to join a so-called spiritual group with a strict, no romantic relationships policy. He left behind everything we had built together, our marriage, our family, our plans for the future, without a shred of hesitation. And then, years later, he suddenly resurfaced, expecting an open-armed welcome like nothing had happened. I'm 29 now. We got married 6 years ago, but we've been divorced for the last 3. My ex, Adam, is 30. We share 2 young sons, 4 and 5 years old, but I have full custody because, truthfully, he didn't want the burden of fatherhood weighing him down. He walked away from it all for what he called a chance to find himself. In the beginning, our life felt like a dream. We were high school sweethearts, each other's first everything. Our relationship spanned nearly a decade before marriage. We got married young, had 2 beautiful kids, and were even planning to buy a house together, so we could finally leave behind our cramped apartment. There was no warning, no slow unraveling. Just one day, out of the blue, he told me he wanted out. His exact words were, "I want to be single and explore the world." At first, I thought he was joking. We had spent most of our lives together, grown up together, and I truly believed we were in it for the long haul. But he seemed convinced that our marriage, our home, and even our children were holding him back. He called our family a weight he needed to be free from. He spoke about needing space to experience life, to learn more about himself, and to see what the world had to offer without being tied down. It was the kind of language that sounded ripped straight from some self-help retreat or a hippie manifesto, idealistic, self-serving nonsense that had nothing to do with real life. What made it worse was that he insisted he still loved me. He swore up and down that his feelings hadn't changed, but that he had to put himself first now. I was heartbroken. I even offered to open up our marriage temporarily, something I never thought I'd even consider, just to try to keep him around for the kids, for us. But he dismissed the idea immediately. He was already mentally checked out, determined to break free the right way, as he called it. He said that if we were meant to be, the universe would bring us back together. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He made it sound so poetic, but all I could see was a man running away from responsibility. Eventually, he packed his bags and left. Just like that. He walked away from our family without so much as a plan, as if our 2 small children would somehow be fine without their father. I asked him point blank what he expected me to do with the kids. His response, "Leave them with someone you trust and go see the world too." Like being a parent was optional. Like our sons were a side quest he could abandon whenever it suited him. That was the moment I knew he was completely disconnected from reality. Parenthood isn't something you opt out of when the mood strikes. It's a permanent, all-in kind of responsibility. You don't get to walk away because you're bored or feel like you missed out on your 20s. I was furious and devastated, but more than anything, I felt betrayed, not just for myself, but for my kids. They deserved better, so I let him go. I didn't fight the divorce. He didn't ask for custody, didn't want the house, the car, nothing. The settlement was simple, almost alarmingly so. His wealthy parents took care of the financial side of things. Alimony and child support were handled without much issue, but his emotional investment was completely gone. He was granted visitation rights, but rarely made an effort. And on the rare occasions he did want to see the kids, it was always on his terms. He'd expect me to drop them off, pick them up, accommodate his schedule, and pretend like he hadn't abandoned us. Meanwhile, I was left to pick up the pieces. I had to explain to 2 tiny children why their dad wasn't around. I had to be both mother and father, constantly stretching myself thin just to make sure they never felt the hole he left behind. And despite everything, part of me kept hoping that maybe he'd come to his senses, realize what he gave up, and try to be a real parent again. But the years went by, and he stayed gone until suddenly, he didn't, out of nowhere, he reappeared. And the most infuriating part, he acted like he could just walk back into our lives and pick up where he left off. Back when Adam still made the occasional effort to see our sons, he would only do so under strict conditions. I had to drive the kids to his parents' house, drop them off, and then wait in a separate room while he spent time with them because seeing me, or even being reminded of our past, was apparently too much for him to handle. It was like he wanted to be a part-time father, without any of the emotional strings attached. But even those brief, awkward visits didn't last long. After a couple of months, he stopped showing up entirely. I didn't understand why at first. His sudden absence was just another confusing chapter in an already surreal story. But then a friend of mine, Rachel, gave me the missing piece of the puzzle and everything clicked into place. About 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Rachel reached out with something she said I needed to hear in person. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when she came over, what she told me changed everything. Rachel had a cousin who happened to run in the same social circle Adam had become involved with. They weren't particularly close, which is probably why Rachel didn't know the full story until after the divorce. Still, once she did, she came straight to me. According to Rachel, her cousin had gotten involved with a group of 6 or 7 guys who prided themselves on their so-called liberated lifestyle. They lived wild, impulsive lives, slept around with whoever they wanted, and refused to be tied down by anything as conventional as a relationship, especially not marriage or children. These men had made a pact to stay single indefinitely, believing that commitment was a kind of prison. It was like they'd created their own philosophy, some warped ideology that turned emotional detachment into a badge of honor. Adam had been introduced to this group through a co-worker, someone who thought he'd fit in with their mindset, even though, at the time, Adam was married with 2 kids. Apparently, the group saw that as a challenge rather than a disqualification. Rachel's cousin even bragged at a family gathering that they'd converted a married man, someone who had ditched his wife and kids to become one of them. He told people this with pride, like they had accomplished something noble. According to him, this man had shed the dead weight, a family life, and was now finally living authentically. Curious, Rachel had asked her cousin what this guy looked like. She couldn't wrap her head around the idea of someone walking away from their entire family because of some peer pressure, masquerading as enlightenment. Her cousin showed her a group photo, and there was Adam smiling, standing shoulder to shoulder with the men who helped destroy our family. That was all the confirmation she needed. The moment the event ended, she messaged me, asking if we could meet. When Rachel arrived at my place, she didn't hold anything back. She laid it all out: the cult-like ideology, the pact to stay single, the toxic validation Adam was chasing. And I sat there in absolute shock. I was angry before, but now, I was livid. To find out that the father of my children left us not because he fell in love with someone else or even because of some deep emotional crisis, but because he wanted to impress a group of self-absorbed man-boys playing philosopher. That was a slap in the face. He abandoned his family for ego points, for status among a bunch of guys who thought bravery meant never being responsible for anyone but yourself. At that moment, I remember thinking, if he had just cheated on me, I could have at least understood it. It would have hurt, sure, but it would have made sense. People cheat. People fall out of love. But this was worse. This was deliberate. He chose to tear apart our family, just to be accepted by people who celebrated selfishness as if it was some kind of virtue. I wanted to call him, to scream at him, to ask him how he could live with himself after what he'd done. But I didn't, because deep down, I realized that there was no point. The man I thought I knew, the one who used to hold our newborn, Sons with tears in his eyes. The one I believed I would grow old with was gone. Whatever had taken his place was just a hollow shell chasing approval from strangers. And in that moment, I stopped hoping he'd come back. I stopped wishing for closure, because now I understood the truth. He hadn't left because of me, or because something in our marriage was broken. He left because he was too weak to be the man he had promised to be. After everything I'd learned, there was no hope left, not for reconciliation, not for some miracle realization on his part. There was no fixing what had been broken. And deep down, I understood that nothing I could say or do would ever change his mind. The man he used to be, the one I married, was gone. What remained was a stranger with a shallow heart and reckless priorities. So I made a choice. I decided to stop chasing closure and instead pour every ounce of energy I had into building a better life for myself. And more importantly, for my boys. I threw myself into my work. I hired a nanny so I could focus while I was at the office and still be fully present when I was home. As soon as I walked through that front door every evening, my time belonged to my kids. No emails, no work calls, just them. My parents were amazing and stepped up whenever I needed a break, and surprisingly, even Adam's parents offered help occasionally, though it always felt like it came from a place of guilt more than anything else. I never asked questions. I didn't need apologies or explanations. I just needed support. The child support payments came in like clockwork, and I had no doubt they were footing the bill. I'd heard through the grapevine that Adam was off jet-setting to tropical beaches and exotic cities, staying in 5-star resorts and burning through money like it grew on trees. With no one else to consider, he could spend it all on himself and sleep soundly at night. But while he was off living his so-called free life, I stayed back and raised 2 kind, bright, gentle boys. They're my whole world. And I'm proud of the little family we've built together, just the 3 of us. We laugh, we play, we support each other, and honestly, that's more than enough for me. Adam is a ghost from another life, one I've stopped mourning. Work-wise, things took a turn for the better too. I worked my way up the ladder, proved myself over and over, and now I'm in a fantastic position, earning more than double what I used to. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I didn't just survive, I rebuilt. For 2 years, I thought the worst was behind me. I thought the chapter was closed. And then, last week, out of absolutely nowhere, Adam came back. It was a Sunday. The boys and I were enjoying a lazy morning at home, our usual routine. I've had enough saved to buy a house by now, but I've stayed in our apartment all this time because I love it. It's cozy, close to work, and filled with memories, not all bad ones. But in hindsight, staying here may have been a mistake, because he knew where to find us. And he did. When I opened the door and saw him standing there, bouquet of oversized red roses in his hands, I swear my breath caught in my throat, but not from shock, from rage. He looked almost exactly the same, maybe a little tired. A little softer around the edges. There were tears in his eyes and that same stupid smile he always wore when he thought he was being charming. But to me, it looked like manipulation. For a second, neither of us spoke. I just stood there, stunned, staring at him and those ridiculous flowers like he'd lost his mind. And then I did what I'd wanted to do for years. I slammed the door in his face, hard enough that the floorboards creaked. I told the boys to go to their room, not because I was afraid of Adam hurting them, he never had that kind of darkness in him, but because I knew what was about to happen wasn't something I wanted them to witness. I wasn't about to let them see me scream, cry, or crumble. Not for him. Sure enough, a few seconds later, he started talking through the door. I could hear the pathetic tremble in his voice as he tried to guilt me, saying this wasn't the kind of welcome home he expected. He tried to play the victim, his voice cracking like he was on the verge of tears. And all I could think was, how dare he? How dare he come back here, after everything he put me through, after walking out on his children, missing birthdays, sick days, their first words, and cry like he was the one who had suffered. Then he started with the apologies. He said he'd come back to make things right, that he was sorry for the pain he caused. He wanted to talk, to reconnect, to be a family again. He actually had the nerve to stand outside my home and say he wanted his old life back, as if it was a sweater he'd tossed aside and now suddenly wanted to wear again, as if the damage he did could be undone with a few tears and a bunch of overpriced flowers. I didn't respond, not yet. I just stood there, gripping the doorknob so hard my knuckles went white, forcing myself to breathe, to think, to not explode on the other side of that door, because if I opened it again, I wasn't sure I could stop myself from saying something I'd regret though. Honestly, I'm not sure anything I said would have been undeserved. When he said he wanted his old life back, I think I stopped breathing for a second. The sheer audacity of it. After everything, this was his idea of redemption? But I let him keep talking. Not because I wanted him back. Not even close. But because some twisted part of me was curious. I'd waited 3 years with no closure, no apology, no explanation. And now he was finally here, saying something, even if it was just nonsense. Maybe I wanted to hear just how delusional he'd become. Or maybe I just wanted him to know, once and for all, that we were fine better, even without him. So I listened. He rambled on about how the last few years had been fun, how he'd traveled, tried new things, embraced his so-called freedom. But at the end of every trip, he said, there was just emptiness. No family waiting, no warmth, just silence and hotel room walls. He said he'd been feeling that way for months now, like something was missing. And he claimed it had taken everything in him to come back, to admit he was wrong, that he'd sacrificed so much for that life, that philosophy his new friends had fed him, and that he felt he had to see it through. But now, apparently, the mask had slipped. He didn't want any of it anymore. He wanted to come back to the life he'd thrown away, back to me, to the kids, to the stability and love he once had. With every word that came out of his mouth, I felt a fire building in my chest. A cocktail of rage and disgust I'd kept buried for so long started to rise. I was half a breath away from flinging that door open, just to slap him across the face, not because I thought it would change anything, but because he deserved it. He didn't leave because he was confused or overwhelmed. He left because he was selfish, because a bunch of man-children convinced him that loyalty and fatherhood were dead weight. So I snapped. I told him to leave, that I didn't want to see him or hear from him. Not now, not ever. But, of course, Adam being Adam thought if he just kept talking, if he kept pleading, he could wear me down. He stood out there rambling like a broken record, trying to milk sympathy from someone who had nothing left to give him. Not love, not kindness, not even patience. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get the kids out of their room and start their dinner. And the last thing I needed was for them to hear their father crying outside the door like he hadn't destroyed their family with his own 2 hands. So I raised my voice and said it loud and clear. We're not your family anymore. Go away. I think that one hit him where it hurt. There was silence after that. Not a word. Not a knock. Just quiet. I fed the boys, keeping my face calm and steady for their sake. But as soon as they were settled, I stepped into the next room and called my attorney. I told her everything, just in case. I didn't know if Adam showing up again meant trouble, if he'd try to fight for custody or make a scene. But I wasn't taking any chances. Then I called my parents. They listened without judgment, just support. My mom reassured me that I'd done the right thing, that I didn't owe Adam anything, not forgiveness, not explanations. And she was right. I didn't call my in-laws. I wouldn't have known what to say even if I tried. And anyway, I figured they'd hear it from their son soon enough. Just as I was about to sit down and finally exhale, my phone rang again this time. It was Rachel. She's been my rock through all of this. Not just a friend, but someone who's given me actual truth when I needed it, even when it hurt. So I picked up immediately. "Did he come by?" were the first words out of her mouth. I said yes. I didn't even have to explain, she already knew. Apparently, her cousin, the same one who'd unknowingly exposed the real reason Adam left in the first place, had called her the moment he heard Adam was back in town. Rachel's cousin, despite being part of that toxic group, had eventually seen Adam's downfall for what it was. According to Rachel, after everything came out years ago, her cousin wasn't exactly proud of having converted him anymore. In fact, the more he saw what Adam had lost, what he gave up, the more uneasy he became. He told Rachel he hadn't expected it to go that far, that Adam was supposed to flirt with freedom, not obliterate his entire life for it. Rachel and I talked for a long time that night. She listened while I let out all the feelings I'd bottled up from that awful doorstep scene. The anger, the disgust, the bizarre relief. And through it all, she reminded me of one thing. That closure doesn't always come from the person who hurt you. Sometimes you have to create it yourself. I never blamed Rachel's cousin, not really. He might have been the one to bring Adam into that friend circle, but it wasn't his job to keep Adam grounded. That was Adam's responsibility, and he failed miserably. If anything, I blamed Adam for being so easy to sway, so desperate to chase after validation and excitement that he traded his entire life away for it. Her cousin had promised to keep us updated after everything came out, and at one point, he even reached out to me personally. He apologized not just for what he'd done, but for what Adam had done too. I didn't hold anything against him, so I accepted the apology. But we were never friends. I only ever heard about Adam through him because Adam had blocked me the second the divorce was finalized. Like that would erase everything. So whatever little I knew about Adam over the years, I knew through Rachel, and she knew it through her cousin. This time wasn't any different. A couple of hours after Adam showed up at my door, Rachel called and filled me in on what had really triggered his grand return. It turned out that Adam had texted his little band of man-child brothers in their group chat right before he came over to me. He told them what he was about to do, how he planned to apologize to me, how he wanted to reclaim his old life, as if that's something you can just walk back into, like it's a store you stormed out of. Apparently, the guys were initially supportive, or at least they pretended to be. But Adam, being the emotionally stunted mess he is, lashed out at them anyway. He told them they were all frauds, that they sold him a dream, convinced him to throw away his family for this flashy, freewheeling lifestyle, and then betrayed him by settling down. Every last one of them had, over the years, found someone. They were dating now, some seriously. One was even engaged. And there was Adam, alone. The only one who'd actually gone through with it. The only one dumb enough to torture marriage, abandon his kids, and blow up his entire life just to chase some shallow version of freedom they used to glamorize back in their 20s. It was all crashing down on him now. The group tried to defend themselves. They told him they'd never made him do anything. They'd just shared their beliefs. It wasn't like they'd handed him a checklist and said, "Leave your wife and kids or you're out." He could have stayed friends with them. Sure, they couldn't travel the world together anymore, but nobody asked him to cut ties with his family. That had been his choice, his alone. But Adam didn't want to hear that. He wanted someone to blame, someone to apologize. He felt betrayed not because they'd changed, but because he hadn't. He was still clinging to that old narrative, the one where freedom meant walking away from love, loyalty, and responsibility. And now, seeing all his so-called brothers grow up and move on, he was panicking, trying to switch gears again, trying to rewrite the past by crawling back to me. Hearing all of this from Rachel sent a wave of white-hot rage through me. Not because I was shocked, but because for a fleeting moment, I'd felt guilty after slamming the door in his face. I'd second-guessed myself, just a little. Wondered if maybe I'd been too harsh, but now I realized exactly what he was doing. He wasn't back because he missed us. Not really. He wasn't here out of guilt or grief or some sudden awakening of fatherly love. He was here because the people he threw us away for had moved on and he didn't want to be left behind again. So, yes, I was furious. I was furious at myself for even entertaining the idea that maybe he deserved forgiveness, that maybe there was something real behind his tears. But no, it was all just another performance. Another shift in persona to fit the crowd he wanted to impress. I hung up with Rachel, pacing the living room like a storm waiting to break. My boys were quietly watching a cartoon in the other room, completely unaware of the emotional bomb their father had just dropped at our doorstep. I looked at them and knew that I had made the right decision. That shutting him out wasn't an act of cruelty. It was protection. For them, for me. And that's why I had to call my parents next, because I needed someone to remind me that I wasn't crazy for choosing peace over chaos, that I wasn't cruel for not letting the manipulator walk back into our lives. If I'd known the truth before Adam showed up, if I'd known why he was really standing on my porch, playing the part of the prodigal husband, I swear he wouldn't have walked away with his dignity intact. But unfortunately, Rachel's cousin had been completely swamped at work when all the drama unfolded in their group chat. He hadn't even checked his phone until later that night. By the time he saw what Adam had written and told Rachel, it was already too late. Adam had come and gone, and I'd already had to sit through his performance. Still, once Rachel told me everything, the fog cleared. I made up my mind fully and finally. There would be no second chance. No door left ajar for him to creep back in. He hadn't changed. Not in any way that actually mattered. And if he never felt the weight of what he'd done, if he never truly regretted walking away from his family, then why should I be the one carrying guilt? Why should I feel bad for choosing peace over his chaos? No, he was a selfish man who did selfish things. That's who he was. That's who he'd always been. And I owed it to myself and to my kids not to let him worm his way back into our lives just because the consequences of his choices had finally caught up to him. After that, I braced myself for his next move. I expected a second appearance at my door, or at least a desperate phone call. But days went by and there was silence. I asked Rachel to check in with her cousin, just in case Adam was laying low and plotting some dramatic comeback. But she came back with bad news. Her cousin had been blocked, just like the rest of the guys from that group chat. Even though he hadn't been part of the fight, Adam had cut him off too, and that worried me more than anything. For all his immaturity and drama, Adam was predictable. He never made a move without consulting his bros. The guy wouldn't buy a pair of shoes without texting 5 people about it. But now he was completely disconnected from the only people who used to give me some insight into what he was planning. I suddenly felt like I was sitting in a dark room with no idea which direction the storm would come from next. So when my in-laws called out of the blue 3 days ago, I was completely blindsided. The tone in their voice told me everything before they even got to the point. They were calling on Adam's behalf. They said they wanted to discuss what I'd said to him when he came to try and fix things. Fix things. Like that's all this had been, something minor that could be glued back together with a few words and a hug. I told them clearly and calmly that I didn't want him back, period. But they didn't let it go. They started arguing, saying they'd been the ones paying child support. that they'd done their part to make sure their grandchildren were cared for, and that I had no right to say this wasn't Adam's family anymore. They sounded offended, like I'd insulted their legacy or something. Eventually, it turned into a full-blown argument. I told them they were defending the indefensible. They told me I was being vindictive. I hung up. And ever since, I've been replaying that conversation in my mind, trying to figure out if I was in the wrong somehow. But no matter how I turn it over, I just don't see it. I didn't ask Adam to walk away. I didn't choose this life for my kids, he did. And sure, his parents have upheld their end financially. But that doesn't mean they or he get to walk back into our lives whenever it suits them. Yes, legally Adam still has visitation rights. He just hasn't used them in years. And that's where my real worrying comes in. As much as I despise the idea of him being involved again, I keep thinking about my children. Do they need a father? Would I be taking something away from them if I fought to have those rights revoked? Can I even do that? I don't have all the answers yet. I just know that right now, I'm the only parent they have. I've been here, I've shown up, and everything I do for them. So yeah, maybe I was harsh when I told him we weren't his family anymore. But I said it because it was true. Family isn't just about DNA, it's about presence, love, accountability, and he hasn't given us any of that in 3 years. Update: I want to say thank you to everyone who commented, who offered advice and support. It's been 2 days since I shared all this, and after reading through everything, I've decided to pursue a change in the custody agreement. I don't know how it'll go. I'm not sure what my chances are, but I'm going to try. I don't want him having visitation rights anymore, not after everything. My kids deserve consistency, and I'll fight for that, no matter what it takes. My parents agreed with me. They said the same thing I'd been feeling for a long time, that Adam and his parents may have honored the legal side of things by paying child support, but the real work, that was always mine. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who did the school pickups, who wiped the tears and packed the lunches. They sent money. I gave everything. And now he thought he could just opt in when it suited him. Like he had some kind of emotional punch card he could clock back in with after 3 years of silence. No, he doesn't get to dictate the terms of his return. Not when we were the ones who had to pick up the pieces. Update 2: I filed for termination of Adam's parental rights today. I wish I'd done it sooner. Honestly, I regret not taking that step the moment he stopped coming around after those first few months. I kept waiting, maybe out of hope, maybe guilt, or some quiet part of me that still thought he might one day come back and do the right thing. But he never did. And now it's too late. He had his chance. People kept telling me I shouldn't deprive my children of their father, but the truth is, they never had one. Not in the real sense of the word. A real father is present. A real father shows up, not just when it's convenient or when life with the boys stops being fun. There's no telling if Adam might disappear again. Actually, I'd bet on it. So I made my choice. He left once. This time, it's permanent. He's free to go chase whatever illusion of freedom he's still clinging to, but not at the cost of my peace, not at the cost of our kids' stability. I'm done letting him dangle his involvement over our heads, like it's some kind of gift. I don't think I'm depriving my children of anything by removing a ghost from their lives. You can't miss what you never really had, and I know now, without a shadow of a doubt, that I'm enough for them. I have been enough. Update 3: So I didn't manage to get his rights completely terminated. The court didn't go that far, but I did get a partial win. Any visitation he gets has to be supervised by me. It's not perfect, but it's a start. It means he doesn't get to stroll in and out anymore. It means there's accountability now. If he ever wants more than that, He's going to have to prove to the court that he can be a stable, responsible father, not just for a few weeks, not just when it feels good, but consistently. And as for me, I made it clear he's never getting me back. That door is locked, nailed shut, bricked over, and buried under concrete. It's not happening. After the hearing, he tried to corner me again, probably thinking I'd be soft because we were leaving court and emotions were high. But I snapped. I finally told him everything. I'd been holding back how. I knew exactly what he'd done and why. That pathetic need to be accepted by his friends. That's what he chose over us. So I told him, flat out, to go marry them instead. I was done being the fallback. And then I told him something else. Something I meant with every fiber of my being. If he hadn't been the father of my children, I wouldn't have even spit on someone like him. I walked away with my kids, holding their little hands in mine, and didn't look back. I left him and his parents standing there, jaws slack, not a single word between them. That moment, that was mine. After everything, I finally got to walk away on my own terms. I don't know what the future holds, and I'm not going to pretend that it'll all be easy from here. But I know this, my kids are okay. They're safe. They have someone who's never left, never wavered, never quit. If Adam wants to prove he can be the father they need, he can try. And maybe they won't have to learn how to shave from YouTube. But if he ever tries anything shady again, if he lies, disappears, or hurts them, I swear, I'll make sure he never gets another chance. He's already messed with my head enough, but I'll be damned if I let him mess with theirs. And here's what I'll tell you at the very end. You watch this story to the end. It means only one thing. This video format suits you. You should subscribe to the channel too. Continue listening to similar stories in this format.